Welcome to the laws of cooking on Shabbat. This will be part 23 of the class. Today's topic, accepting Shabbat money from one who desecrates Shabbat. Rav David Yosef Shlita in the Sefer Halacha Birura begins. Yehudi she'asa melacha b'Shabbat. If you had a Jew who went ahead and he did a melacha on Shabbat, the definition of melacha is a forbidden labor. Yehudi she'asa melacha b'Shabbat. If you had a Jew that went ahead and he did melacha on Shabbat, b'mezid, knowingly, l'torach atzmo, he did it for himself. We'll see that there is a very big difference when he's doing it for himself versus when he's doing it for someone else. Yehudi she'asa melacha b'Shabbat b'mezid l'torach atzmo. If you had a Jew that went ahead and he did a melacha on Shabbat, knowingly for himself, ורוצה למכור אחר השבת את מה שעשה בשבת. Now he wants to sell this that he did on Shabbat after Shabbat. The question is, can you purchase that item from him? Rav David Yosef Shlita says, mutar liknot mimenu. You are allowed to go ahead and buy that item from him, even though it came through desecration of Shabbat. Why? Since he himself is able to sell this that he did on Shabbat, so therefore you are able to buy it from him. In the previous classes we started seeing that if a Jew desecrated Shabbat knowingly, for example, let's use one simple example, but you could apply it to anything else. If a Jew went ahead and he cooked food on Shabbat for himself, knowingly, the halacha is going to say, on Shabbat he's not allowed to eat that food. After Shabbat he's not allowed to eat that food. When is he allowed to eat that food? Never ever. He's not allowed to benefit from it through consumption. However, what about benefiting from the food by selling it to someone else? What's the halacha going to say? He's allowed to. If he wants to give it as a present, or when it comes to his family members, let them eat it, or he wants to sell it, all this is after Shabbat. Or he wants to feed it to the dog. Is he allowed to do so? 100%. So we see from over here, even though you have a Jew that desecrated Shabbat, he went ahead and he cooked. Let's say he made himself a nice steak. We're going to tell him, since you did it b'mezid, you yourself are not allowed to eat it. That's the only benefit you are not allowed to have. However, other forms of benefit, for example, giving it as a present to someone, selling it to someone, or feeding your dog, even though in each one you have different types of benefits, nevertheless, we're going to tell you it's allowed. Since it's permissible for him to sell the food after Shabbat, therefore it's permissible for the buyer to buy it from him after Shabbat. This is the first case Rav David Yosef Shlita spoke about. This case is a little bit different. Aval, however, Yehudi she'oved b'Shabbat kima'asehu behol. If you had a Jew that he works on Shabbat, just like he would work during a regular day, for him Shabbat and weekday are the same days. Urmaviach ma'od me'avodoto b'Shabbat. He makes money from the work which was done on Shabbat. Asur lo lehenot me'otam ma'ot she'erviach b'Shabbat. It is forbidden for the person to benefit from that money that he made on Shabbat. Now, before I do continue, Rav David Yosef Shlita says that if you have a person that his Shabbat is no different than any other regular day of the week, so we see mamish, the guy doesn't just care about anything. Over here we're going to tell you that if you went ahead and let's say he cooked something on Shabbat, let's say he's a chef, for example. I'm going to keep it to food, but you could apply it to anything else. Let's say this person is a chef. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he cooks. Shabbat also cooks. He doesn't care. Now, If after Shabbat he went ahead, or even on Shabbat, but the chiddush is, the novelty is, even after Shabbat, he went ahead and he sold the food. Let's say he made 50 pieces of steak on Shabbat, and after Shabbat, he sold them. He made $5,000, for example. We're going to tell you that $5,000, he is not allowed to benefit from that money. Why isn't he allowed to benefit from that money? Because remember, this person, number one, desecrated Shabbat. That's a punishment on its own. But now the Chachamim are going to also come and they're going to give him another penalty. That when you went ahead and you sold it even after Shabbat. So you would have thought, okay, so I desecrated Shabbat, it's between me and God. But let me go at least sell the meat, and let me go ahead and enjoy the money. Come to Chacham, the Chachamim say, no, Asur lo lehanot me'otam ma'ot, shirvich b'Shabbat. It is forbidden for that person to benefit from the money which he made on Shabbat. Why? Mishum isur schar Shabbat. Because of the prohibition of Shabbat wages. That's what it's called. But if you can see, I put it in quotes, that means there's much more to it, and I'm going to explain it to you. We need to remember a very important point, that whenever a person cooks on Shabbat, and I'm speaking about the chef, I'm not speaking about the first case. Look, the first case, he's not doing it every day. It happened, Rabotai. That's not his job. He just went ahead and he cooked for him something. He just went ahead and he cooked for himself something, and then eventually he wanted to sell it. Beseder, sell it, take the money, you could benefit. Over here, the second case over here is a little bit different. The second case over here is speaking about a person that what he's doing on Shabbat is actually what he does during the weekday. That's a very big problem. So one more time. In the first case where he speaks about Yehudi Shasam Malacha B'Shabbat B'Meizdi L'Torech Atzmo, he's doing it for himself. That's probably not even his job. He just wanted to go ahead and cook a steak for himself on Shabbat. No problem. We're going to tell him, listen, what you did was wrong. You're playing with fire. It's chas v'shalom karet lo oleinu. But you're not allowed to eat it. Never ever. But you're allowed to sell it or give it as a present. Or other people are allowed to eat it after Shabbat. You can even give it to your dog. You could have other forms of benefit. That's the case over there. But the second case is a little bit different. But over here, when you have a Jew that he's taking Shabbat, he's looking at Shabbat no different than any other day of the week. Let's say he's a chef, so now he's continuing to be a chef also on Shabbat. Now, when he went ahead and he made 10 steaks, and he wants to sell them even after Shabbat, we're going to tell you over here, we're not going to allow him. He can't only benefit from the meat, he can't eat the meat. But also he can't even benefit from the money that is given to him. So even if he sold it, he's not allowed to use that money. What is the reason? Mishum isur schar Shabbat. Because of the prohibition of Shabbat wages. What does that mean? Asur Chachamim lekabel schar tumurat avodah shenaset b'Shabbat. The Chachamim forbade for a person to accept any form of payment in exchange for services which were done on Shabbat. We're going to see, even if these services did not have any prohibited labor inside, everything that you hired the person to do, he did it in a permissible way. Doesn't matter. There's such a thing that's called schar Shabbat, Shabbat wages. A person is not allowed to get paid for services rendered on Shabbat. I'm going to give you one classical example. Reuven and his wife Sarah, they needed to go away for Shabbat for 2 hours to see their parents. So they say, look, let's call our neighbor, let her watch the kids, and then we'll pay her after Shabbat. They go, they call her, she comes, she watches the kids. He tells her, listen, after Shabbat I will come personally and I will pay you. After Shabbat he comes, he gives her $50. That, Rabotai, the Chachamim did not allow you. You're not allowed to work on Shabbat. You're not allowed to do any form of service on Shabbat for someone else on condition that you're going to get paid by them. So even though this girl, she didn't do anything wrong, what did she do? She was watching the kids. She was reading to them story time. She didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. Shabbat wages are not allowed to be given. And one that receives the Shabbat wages is not allowed to benefit from them. That's what we're going to see right over here. Asru chachamim lekabel schar timurat avodah shenaset b'Shabbat. The chachamim forbade a person to receive a payment in exchange for services which were rendered on Shabbat. Why was that so? Mipanei shekabalat schar avur Shabbat. Because whenever a person is receiving a payment for working on Shabbat, bichlal isur mekach u memchar, it's included in the prohibition of doing business dealings on Shabbat. We know you're not allowed to go ahead and do any form of transaction. You cannot speak about business deals on Shabbat. You can't start saying like this, watch. Reuben and Shimon are sitting, they shomer Shabbat, shomer Torah, shomer mitzvot, they daven 3 times a day. On Shabbat, Reuben tells Shimon, listen, Shimon, I have a nice property. If you want it, I'll sell it to you after Shabbat. That you can do. That's not allowed to be done. You can't be discussing business deals on Shabbat. So what did the Chachamim do? The Chachamim went like this. They said like this, look, even though this babysitter, let me just stick with the case of the babysitter, even though this babysitter, she's not really doing anything wrong. Everything she's doing is in a permissible way, just like the mother would do. So why do we forbid her to getting any form of payment? And if she did receive it, she's not going to be allowed to use it. Why is that? Because we are afraid, if we're going to say right now that she's allowed to go ahead and get payment for services rendered on Shabbat, which were done in a permissible way, people are going to take it out of context. They're going to say, one second, if hiring a babysitter is allowed, I know he's going to pay her after. But you see, you're allowed to hire a babysitter. You're allowed to pay her for the Shabbat work that she does. So therefore, maybe I could go ahead and speak about my business dealings also. I'm not going to take the money now. I'll do everything after Shabbat. We don't want these things to happen. So that's what the Chachamim say. Why do we tell you you're not allowed to accept any form of payment for the services rendered on Shabbat? Mipanei shekabalat schar avur Shabbat bechlal isur mekach u memkar. Because accepting a payment for services rendered on Shabbat is included in the prohibition of business dealings. Continues, the Chachamim, they tell us, this schar Shabbat that we tell you you're not allowed to go ahead and receive for services rendered on Shabbat, gam avur avodah shemutar la'asot b'Shabbat. Even if you're getting this payment for the services rendered on Shabbat that you were doing was done in a permissible way, still you're not allowed to receive any form of payment. One more time. If a person went ahead and he worked on Shabbat, he did everything well, he didn't transgress any prohibition from the Torah. He did everything halachically. We're going to see, he's going to give us over here a few examples. Like a waiter, what is he doing? Only bringing plates, putting back, bringing here and there. What is he doing? Or somebody who has to guard something. What are they doing? They're only standing all day. What are they doing? Still the Chachamim said, even though everything that they're doing is being done in a permissible manner, nevertheless, it's called Schar Shabbat. It's called Shabbat wages. You're not allowed to pay it. And if you did pay it, you transgress the words of the Chachamim. And the people are not allowed to benefit from that money. But Rabbi, he didn't do anything. I understand. Like I explained before, since Schar Shabbat falls under the umbrella of Mekach u Memkar, that's why we don't want to play with this. That's what he's telling us right over here. Gam avur avodah shemutar la'asot b'Shabbat. Even if this payment is coming to me on Shabbat, meaning I'm going to get paid after Shabbat for the services rendered on Shabbat, even though it's coming to me for permissible service, nevertheless, we're going to tell you you're not allowed to accept that money. He says over here, Kimo, for example, Shmira miganavim omer latzarot. For example, you got a guard to protect you from thieves, or you got waiters. Asur lekabel schar. It is forbidden for you to accept a payment for your service. You're not allowed to accept. That's it. I'm not speaking about over here anything forbidden. I'm speaking about that the Chachamim made a decree, they enacted that anytime you have schar Shabbat, if you have to get paid for services rendered on Shabbat, even though the services were rendered in a permissible way, we're going to tell you, the Chachamim are going to say, you're not allowed to accept any form of payment for those services. וכן אסור לקבל שכר עבור השכרת מקום או כלים לשבת. So too, if a person wants to go ahead and he wants to rent out a room, or he wants to rent out utensils, for example, chairs, tables, you tell the people, I just need the room for 2 hours on Shabbat. That's all. I don't need it more than that. Or you tell the people, listen, we want to be able to rent out your chairs for 2 hours of Shabbat. The owner of the place or the owner of the utensil is not allowed to rent out to you the place. He's not allowed to rent out to you the utensils, the chairs or the tables. Why isn't he allowed? Because if he's going to go ahead and he's going to rent out the room or the utensils to you only for the Shabbat period, for the 2 hours, comes out that when you have to pay him, you're paying him for services which were rendered on Shabbat. But there's no prohibition being done. You're right, everything's being done in a permissible way. Still, it's called schar Shabbat. You're not allowed to pay him. If you did pay the owner, he's not allowed to benefit from your money. Afil b'diavad, even if it already happened, asur lehanot mischar Shabbat. It is forbidden for a person to go ahead and benefit from Shabbat wages. This, Rabotai, is called schar Shabbat. So now you know, whenever we say schar Shabbat, you have to understand, when I say in English Shabbat wages, all that comes into play. So let's go back over here. Aval, however, Yehudi she'oved b'Shabbat, ki ma'asehu b'chol. If you have a Jew that works on Shabbat just like he would work on a regular weekday, umarviach ma'od me'avodato b'Shabbat, and he makes money from Shabbat work, the money could come to him even on Sunday, Monday, not necessarily on Shabbat. Asur lo lehonot me'otam ma'od she'irvich b'Shabbat. He's not allowed to benefit from the money that came in because of Shabbat work. Why? Mishum isur schar Shabbat. Because of the prohibition of Shabbat wages. Now, this is what we really want to see. וכן אין סוטו, אין להקל לקבל ממנו מאוד לצדקה או במתנה הבאים מרווח שמרוויח מעבודתו בשבת משום איסור שכר שבת. Comes Rav David Yosef, he doesn't say it's asur, he doesn't say it's asur for you to accept the money from him. That he doesn't say. Must be that there are opinions that are lenient. All Rav David Yosef Shlita tells us, one should not be lenient in accepting from that person who desecrates Shabbat or that person who has Shabbat money. He should not accept it for purposes of charity. Or if he wants to even give it to you as a present, you shouldn't accept it. You shouldn't be lenient in accepting it. You should tell him thank you, but no thank you. Because all this Rabotai, all the money, all the Shabbat money comes from services which were rendered on Shabbat. And the reason why you can benefit from it is because Mishum Isur Schar Shabbat. The reason why you're not allowed to go ahead and accept it from him because it falls under the prohibition of Shabbat wages. Now, in our case, we're speaking about a person who's Mamash Michalel Shabbat. No problem. Same thing would apply to a person who's not Michalel Shabbat. For example, a girl only works on Shabbatot. That's her job. She only babysits on Shabbat. She comes to shul to watch the kids. That's it. You know how you have, when the adults are davening, the women have their own section, and children, we don't want them running around. So we tell her, listen, 3 hours you're with them, we're going to pay you. That's all they do. So now at the end of the month, let's say they paid her $2,500 for 4 weeks, whatever it was. But that's all she does. She's working on Shabbat. Again, she's not allowed to be working on Shabbat on condition of receiving a payment. If she did do that, the shul is not allowed to pay her the money. If they did do that, she's not allowed to benefit from the money. But what happens if she wants to come and she wants to donate this money for charity purposes, or she wants to give it to you as a present? Can you accept it from her? No, you should not accept it from her. Rav David Yosef Shlita says over here in the yellow highlight, V'chen en la'akel lekabel. Do not be lenient in accepting that money. So that was case number 2. Now, case number 3. V'chen en so to Yehudiya oseh malacha b'Shabbat al menat limchor. Now this is a completely different halakha. Rabotai, first case we spoke about when the Jew was doing it for himself, like he was cooking food for himself. So we said the laws there. Second case, which is a little bit more worse off, Aval Yehudi shovet b'Shabbat, k'maseu b'chol. Second case, this Jew treats Shabbat as a regular weekday. So we said the halachot over there. Now, Rabotai, the third case is even more worse. Why? Because now it's going to speak about what happens if the whole time. Now, this could be any situation. This could be, I don't have to necessarily be taking Shabbat, meaning I don't have to necessarily look at Shabbat just like I look at my regular weekday, meaning it's not really complementary to the second case. It could be in a general situation. For example, in the first case, we spoke about a regular guy that he was just cooking food for himself. In the second case, we're speaking about a guy who's cooking a Shabbat just like he would cook on a regular weekday. But right now, we're going to discuss a case. It could be a regular guy, or it could be a guy who's also, who works throughout the weekday, and he also treats Shabbat like the weekday. It could be any situation. Look what he says. V'chen en so to Yehudiya oseh malacha b'Shabbat al menat limchor. Rabotai, just another case. If you have a Jew who goes ahead and he does a malacha on Shabbat on condition to sell. For example, he cooks food just to sell. It doesn't really have to be his parnasa. Maybe all week long he's not doing anything, and on Shabbat it just hits him, he wants to cook. Okay, I just want to make sure I am clear. Rabotai, watch this. This case, it could be any Jew doing it for himself. This case, the second case over here, is a little bit more stricter because he's really looking at Shabbat as if it's nothing. For him, it doesn't mean nothing. So you really have a real whole problem of Schar Shabbat. Now we want to get into the topic. What happens? You have a Jew that he wants to go ahead and he wants to cook on condition to sell. Maybe he's a chef. Maybe he does it throughout the week. Or maybe not. Maybe he wants to make this a hobby for him, just Shabbat alone. Throughout the week he does something else. He's a barber, let's say. Shoemaker, lawyer, I don't know. And on Shabbat he has the enjoyment. He likes to cook steaks and shish kebab. And this is what he's going to sell after Shabbat. Whatever. So he says over here, V'chen Yehudiya oseh malacha b'Shabbat al menat limchor. And so if you have a Jew who does malacha on Shabbat on condition to sell, afilu mocher rak acher Shabbat. Even if he's going to go ahead and he's going to sell it after Shabbat, et ma shasa b'Shabbat, this that he did on Shabbat, mikol makom, nevertheless, Kevin she'oseh al menat limchor, since he's doing it on condition to sell, ve'asur liknot mimenu et ma shasa b'Shabbat, and it's forbidden for you to buy from him this that what he did on Shabbat, as we'll see later on, not in today's class, in another class. It comes out that the money that he made from the items which was done on Shabbat becomes also forbidden for you to use. So therefore he cannot use it, and he's not allowed to go ahead and give it to you as tzedakah or as a present. So one more time, Rabotai. V'chen, and so to Yehudiya oseh malacha b'Shabbat al menat limchor. If you have a Jew that is doing malacha on Shabbat on condition to sell, let's use the food business. Let's say he's cooking food. Afilu mocher rak acher Shabbat. Even if he's going to go ahead and he's going to sell it after Shabbat, at ma shasa b'Shabbat, this that he did on Shabbat. Let's say he cooked 10 steaks. Mikol makom, nevertheless, kevan shoseh al minat lemchor, since he made these 10 steaks on condition to sell, ve'asur liknot mimenu et ma shasa b'Shabbat, it is forbidden for you to buy this what he made on Shabbat. The 10 steaks, you're not allowed to buy it, as we'll see it in the next class. Mimela comes out, ne'esru ha'ma'ot, the money also becomes asur. Haba'ot me'harevach shel ma shasa b'Shabbat. Any Shabbat money, even though I'm making this money after Shabbat, but since the money is coming on items or on food in our case, since the money is coming on the food of Shabbat, where he went ahead and he desecrated on his behalf, we're going to tell you the money becomes asur. So the same halacha is going to apply like this. Just like we saw in halacha 2, right over here, the second case, if you had a Jew who treats Shabbat just like a regular weekday, over there we tell you he's not allowed to benefit from the money because of schar Shabbat, because of Shabbat wages. Same thing we're going to tell you over here. Even if you have a Jew that he's not accustomed to cooking throughout the week, he might be a lawyer, doctor, shoemaker, just on Shabbat he has this hobby. Doesn't matter. If he's doing it on condition to sell to other people, and even if he's only going to sell it after Shabbat, we're going to tell you, since he's doing it on condition to sell after Shabbat, and we're saying later on, we'll see actually this, that it's forbidden for you to purchase these things from him. It comes out that the money becomes forbidden, not the money. The money. It comes out that the money becomes forbidden from this that he profited from the services which were rendered on Shabbat. So up to here, Rabotai, it's clear. Let me go step by step. We'll see the review also, but let me just go step by step outside. Case number 1, a person went ahead and he cooked on his own behalf, steak. He did it knowingly. We're going to tell him you're never ever allowed to eat it. However, he's allowed to sell it and he's allowed to benefit from that money. Case number 2, a person who treats Shabbat no different than treating the regular weekday, him we're going to tell, my friend, if you went ahead, even if you sold this meat after Shabbat, the money is prohibited, and when it comes to giving that money as a present or as tzedakah, we're going to tell the people on the receiving end to tell them thank you, but no thank you. Rav David Yosef Shlita says, do not be lenient in accepting that money. The third case we saw, what happens if you have a person that he's cooking on Shabbat or he's making anything else on Shabbat only on condition to sell it after Shabbat. Even if he's going to sell it after Shabbat. Still, we're going to tell you, as we'll see later on, Billy Nether, since it's forbidden to go ahead and purchase products from these type of people that desecrate Shabbat on behalf of other people, nevertheless, we're going to tell you if he did it, the money becomes prohibited for use, and we're going to tell you you're not allowed to use that money. You don't accept it as tzedakah, don't accept it as a matana. However, now in the fourth case, Rav David Yosef is going to show us when can you really accept money from a person that made money because of desecration of Shabbat. Or not even desecration of Shabbat, a regular person, like we spoke about the waiter or the babysitter, they went ahead and that's all they do, they work on Shabbat. Now they want to give it to you as a present, or they want to give tzedakah money with that. Doesn't matter. We're going to tell you, do not be lenient in accepting money of Shabbat, meaning Shabbat wages. So comes Rav David Yosef, and now he's going to give us an exception. Nevertheless, היינו דווקא כשידעו בוודאי שאותם מעות באו מרווח שהרוויח מעבודתו בשבת. When are we going to tell you shouldn't be lenient in accepting somebody else's money? That is specifically if you know for sure that the money that he's giving you to you now is Shabbat money. Aval, however, however, if this person also works throughout the other days of the week, I don't know, this money that he's giving me now, is it coming from his Shabbat, is it coming from weekday money or is it coming from Shabbat money? I don't know. For example, a person comes, he says, Rabbi, here's your check. For example, a person comes and says, Rabbi, here's a $10,000 check. Am I allowed to accept it or not? This guy is Michalel Shabbat. This guy owns a business. Am I allowed to accept the money, yes or no? Comes Rav David Yosef and he says like this. If you know that this check that he's giving you right now, let me make it a bit more practical. A person has two accounts. One savings, one checking. His checking account is the money that he makes throughout the week, from Sunday to Friday. His savings account, because he wants to save for retirement, is only Shabbat money. So when he comes and he gives you the check, let's say he gives you a $50,000 check or $10,000, doesn't matter. He tells you, Rabbi, you should know this is from my savings account. And if I know, Rabotai, that his savings account is only money that was accumulated there was Shabbat money, I'm not allowed to accept it. Let's put it to you like that. You're not allowed to be lenient in accepting the money. However, if he tells you this is money from my checking account, I'm allowed to accept it. Why? Because it's not Shabbat money, it's weekday money. That was like a case just for us to understand what's going on over here. Comes Rav David Yosef Shluta and he says like this. If the money that he's giving you right now, you don't know if this money, okay, not everybody, again, you don't have a checking account for weekday and saving account for Shabbat, you don't have that. Your Shabbat money that is made for Shabbat services or for weekday services all go into one account. So you might have $100,000 in the account. And now let's say 45, 50, 60,000 of those dollars are Shabbat money, for example. So when you come and you write a check for the rabbi for $10,000, I don't have to sit there and assume that this $10,000 that you're giving me is coming from the Shabbat money. No, I don't have to do that. I could assume it's also coming from the weekday money. Who said I have to assume it's coming from the Shabbat money? Why? All the $100,000 in your account is all Shabbat money? No, it's also weekday money. So I'm going to tell you it's coming from the weekday money. And that's what Rav David Yosef is telling us right over here, Rabotai. Look at this one more time. Nevertheless, when do we say you're not allowed to benefit from Shabbat money? That is specifically if you know that money that he's giving you right now is Shabbat money. But if he also works throughout the other days of the week, however, he says, but if this person also works throughout the other days of the week, and it's not known to me right now that the money that he's giving me right now as tzedakah, is this Shabbat money or is this weekday money? I don't know. Perfect. He says over here, you're allowed to go there, you're allowed to be lenient and accept the money from him for charity purposes. He's allowed to give you the money as tzedakah. You're allowed to even accept it. This, Rabotai, is the class for today. Let's see a review. Remember, we had 4 cases. So, first case, work done on Shabbat for oneself. If a Jew did malacha on Shabbat for his own use, for example, he cooked food for himself or made something for personal benefit, and after Shabbat he decides to sell what he made, it is permitted to buy from him. Why? Because the object itself is not forbidden after Shabbat, since he did it for himself, not for commerce. Therefore, he may sell it and others may buy it. Working on Shabbat, which is case number 2, like during the week. If a Jew works on Shabbat as his regular job, for example, he is employed or runs a business on Shabbat, then all the money he earns for that Shabbat work is forbidden to benefit from. This is called schar Shabbat, Shabbat wages, which Chazal forbade. Now, Rabotai, remember, not only does schar Shabbat apply to services rendered on Shabbat in a prohibited way, schar Shabbat also applies for services rendered on Shabbat in a permissible way, like a babysitter, a waiter, a rabbi, a chazan, a teacher, doesn't matter. Because of this, he himself is not allowed to benefit from that money. Because of Schar Shabbat, he's not allowed to benefit from that money. Others may not accept such money as charity or as a gift, since it comes from forbidden Shabbat wages. Case number 3. Work done on Shabbat with intention to sell. If someone creates items on Shabbat with the intention to sell them later, the money earned from selling those items is also forbidden, even though the sale happens after Shabbat. Since the production was done on Shabbat for profit, the earnings are considered tainted and forbidden. Case number 4. When it is permitted to accept, all the above applies only when it is certain that the money being given is specifically from profits made through Shabbat work. But if the person works both on weekdays and on Shabbat, and it is not known whether the money being donated comes from weekday income or Shabbat income, then one may accept it for tzedakah. The doubt allows for leniency. Okay, and this was when we spoke about Schar Shabbat. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.